Hello and welcome to today's webinar on modernizing your data protection infrastructure with PureStorage and Veeam to recover from cyber attacks. Today's event is brought to you by PureStorage and Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be your moderator for this event. Before I introduce today's presenters, we have a little bit of housekeeping to cover. First off, we want this to be a very educational event. You have questions about data protection and cyber attacks and recovery and disaster recovery and scalability and availability. Now's the time to get those questions answered because we have experts from PureStorage and Veeam available to cover all those questions at the end of this session. So we encourage you to get those questions in early, ask as many as you would like, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event where we'll be taking the best questions from our audience live. I also want to point out that the handouts for today's presentation are available as a PDF download in your audience console. If you click on the Handouts tab, you'll find the full presentation that you can download there and share with your friends and colleagues. And finally, at the end of the event, we'll be doing a live drawing for a $300 Amazon gift card. That drawing is only for attendees who are present on the live event. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. Full price terms and conditions can be found at events.actualtechmedia.com. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. David Huskisson, Rapid Restore Solutions Manager at PureStorage, and Mr. Sean Liu, Solutions Architect with the Global Alliances team at Veeam. David, Sean, take it away.
Thank you, David. And welcome to our webinar on how we're going to show you how Flash not only improves your availability and helps your data protection, but the other things outside of those universes it can do for you. So just to give you a sense of how the session will flow, there's really three easy steps to modernize your data protection architecture and strategy. So we'll start off by talking about actually protecting your workloads. So using Veeam's integration with FlashArray to really get industry leading data protection, minimal footprint, and performance. And Sean will take you through that. Then we'll start talking about how to leverage Flash as a secondary tier. So I will introduce our product, our solution, FlashBlade, and talk about its really tight integration with Veeam, but also all the other things that FlashBlade can do. And then we'll close out by talking about long-term retention. So tape has been around a long time. There's still a lot of tape out there, but we're seeing over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, there's been a pretty shift towards, public cloud, private cloud. So we'll talk about how our object engine technology in partnership with Veeam can help you realize long-term data protection. Okay, so let's start at step one. I'm going to just briefly talk through how we protect primary workloads with Veeam, and Sean will take you through some of the technical nuances. So just a level set, Pure's offering here, this is how Pure started, this is how Pure got to where we've got to, is with FlashArray, which was the first all-flash designed from the ground upwards storage array. And we're extremely proud of what FlashArray has delivered for our customers. We've got a lot of customers running their mission critical workloads on FlashArray. More recently, we've embraced cloud. So I'll show you some of the recent innovations that we've announced that help you really leverage, cloud. And, just some of the sort of features of FlashArray X. We've got built-in deduplication and compression. We've got some great snapshot technologies, which I'll drill down to in a moment. And I'm particularly proud of our evergreen model. So that ability that when you purchase FlashArray and you sign a support agreement, we keep support and maintenance flat and fair throughout the lifetime of the contract. So pricing doesn't change, whether it's year 1 or year 4. But I think what's more important in this market is technology shifts very quickly, as you all know. And our evergreen program allows FlashArray customers and FlashBlade customers, incidentally, to take advantage of changing technology. So every 3 years, we will revisit our FlashArray customers as technology changes inside of FlashArray. So the controllers get smaller and quicker, and we will come back as part of our support contract with you and fit new technology to your FlashArray or FlashBlade. And we will do it non-disruptively. So we've never had a customer experience any downtime when we've come back. We're on our second generation of FlashArray controllers, and we've never had a customer who's had downtime as we've upgraded them, even when the form factor has changed. So we are very careful when we design FlashArray components that we always think about the future, because technology changes so quickly. So that's FlashArray really in a slide. So why are we talking about FlashArray? Well, one of FlashArray's best capabilities is snapshots, and we've got a really good snapshot technology inside of FlashArray. They're very, very quick to perform. You can roll back to any point in time. So they're always thin snapshots, deduped and compressed. So we're particularly proud of our snapshot technology, which is generally orchestrated through Pure1, our management interface. But I think what we're especially proud of is how open we've made those snapshots for other vendors to plug into. And this is really the sort of bones of our sort of phase one story here, is the integration we've done between Veeam and FlashArray. So I'm going to hand over to Sean, who's just going to talk to you some of the technical nuances.
All right, thank you, David. That's a perfect segue there, talking about the advantages of the snapshot technology within FlashArray. So as part of the evolution of your data center, and as you're purchasing new hardware and new equipment, you also want to evolve your data protection solution as well, right? And the next step, the evolution of data protection, is to become aware of the new hardware that you're purchasing, right? And as part of that, we actually have a plugin architecture within Veeam that allowed Pure to write a Pure plugin that you can just import directly into your Veeam backup and replication console and leverage the really great capabilities that Pure has within their snapshot engine for your backup and data protection solution as well, right? So why do we care, right? Why do we want to take advantage of this? As you can see there with your standard VM backup, the VM snapshot is open for the entire duration of the backup job, right? So if you're looking at protecting a larger VM, this could be open for several hours, right? What this means is that the entire time is open, there's a lot of data that's being written into that snapshot. So once we've completed our backup job, now you have to go and consolidate that snapshot, right? You have to merge all of those writes back into your production VM. And that could take some time. Not only that, but it can have some adverse effects as well, right? High load, potential stun of the application even. Right? So to avoid all of that, we have our snapshot integration with Pure, which leverages all the goodness and all of the efforts they've made into developing their snapshot engine. And as you can see there, the VMware snapshot is only open momentarily. And that's only because we have a patent pending approach to performing backup from storage snapshots. So we actually still leverage vSphere snapshot momentarily so we can capture some really critical data like change block tracking data, right? And how this is used is on subsequent runs, we can actually leverage the change block tracking data. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But once we create the vSphere snap, we then create the hardware snap, and we immediately release the vSphere snap after we've created a FlashArray snapshot. So as you can see, the VMware snapshot is only open momentarily, right? And it's consolidated with zero impact to the environment, essentially. Right? Now we can proceed with backing up the remainder of the data directly from the storage snapshot. And when we're done, you can choose to either retain or delete the storage snapshot with no impact to your environment. Right? And on subsequent runs of our backup job, we will go back and leverage that change block tracking data to be able to immediately identify any change blocks within that snapshot and be able to perform incremental backup job runs up to 10 times faster than competing solutions. Next slide, please, David. So in order to further enhance our capabilities, it's not just important to be able to back up your data and be able to take it offline and send it to a different storage target, but you also want to effectively be able to shrink your recovery point objectives, right? This means most of our customers that we run into only back up once or maybe even twice a day, right? But you really can't do backups that often because backups generally have some sort of impact to the environment, right? Whether we're backing up from storage snapshots or not, you still have to move a good bit of data around, right? So in between your backup job runs, as this example is showing, what we can do is we can also schedule storage snapshots within Veeam Backup and Replication itself. So you don't have to go into the FlashArray console and create or schedule any backups. We can do it all directly from Veeam. And we can use those snapshots to augment your backups, right? And what I mean by this is if you're only backing up once per day in this particular example, your recovery point objective is effectively 24 hours, right? So if you were to have a disastrous event, you could potentially lose 24 hours worth of data, right? And that may be unacceptable to particular applications like SQL or Exchange or maybe even some sort of web backend that runs your business. Right, that amount of data loss is not good. So to shrink that recovery point objective, we can take snapshots incrementally in between our backup job runs. Right. So in this particular example, we're creating snapshots every hour. Right. So for those mission critical applications, we now have effectively shrunk the recovery point objective down to an hour. Right. And of course, this is just an example. You can perform snapshots more often than that as well. Next slide, please, David. So being able to create snapshots and backups, it's great to be able to shrink your recovery point objective, but where the rubber really meets the road is when you do have an outage and you do need to perform a recovery, right? For many options out there, right, being able to recover from a snapshot is not all that illustrious, right, because it may be complicated. You may have a specific process you have to go through to clone that snapshot and mount it up and do all of these little things before you can actually get to recovering your data. The beautiful thing about what we've done with our integration is we've introduced the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots. And this allows you to actually leverage the snapshots as well as your backups to perform any number of different recovery options. And the recovery options remain the same, right? Whether you're recovering from a backup or from a snapshot. So this is why we say you can actually augment your data protection strategy with snapshots because we give you the same recovery options. Right, so from the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots, you have the ability to restore not only entire virtual machines, but you can go in there and pull out individual files within the guest operating system. We even have specific explorers for specific applications like Exchange and SQL and Active Directory, among others, that help facilitate faster recovery. Right, so we can effectively not only shrink your recovery point objective with our integration, but we can also effectively shrink your recovery time objectives because we're not having to restore an entire Exchange database to just pull out a single email, right? That Veeam Explorer for Exchange is going to help you find and restore that single email in a matter of minutes. So it's about being able to restore what you need when you need it as quickly as possible, whether that data resides on a snapshot or on a backup. And I'm going to pass it back to David.
Thank you, Sean. And so we've had this really great integration for some time with Veeam, and I just wanted to share very briefly, a success story. So this is a UK-based construction company, and we were competing very aggressively with NetApp. And you can see there, some of the things that Sean talked about. Just that ability to get those snapshots and the ability to take them frequently and have Veeam do the orchestration, both from a policy perspective and a recovery perspective. And you can see, again, some of the things I said earlier about FlashArray, the fact that I can do non-disruptive upgrades and the evergreen model that keeps my hardware, up to date with the latest technology trends. So this was a great success for both Veeam and Pure. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly talk about two recent innovations that we've announced. So the first innovation here is a new model of flash array. So right now we're at flash array X, which is at low latency, high performance flash array. But we've actually released flash array C. So we announced that at our show in September at Pure Accelerate. And really, this is you can see the beauty of flash array C. It's QLC flash, so it's a lower cost model than flash array X. So we're very excited about that, and it really solves different problems. So it's really geared, more in the sort of it's more aiming at capacity rather than high performance, and it's really geared as a potentially a great device for maybe tier 2 workloads. So certainly. And potentially longer term storage. So we've talked about snapshots, and we absolutely see flash array C as a great repository for snapshots. So you'll be able to take the snapshots we've talked about with Veeam on flash array X, and then using our snap to NFS capability in flash array, you'll be able to copy those snapshots to flash array C. And leave those snapshots, lying around for much longer. So we're very excited about C. It's literally only been out of the gate a couple of months. So we did we had a big beta program. We actually sold a lot during the beta program, just because it gives you all the features of X. So it's the same Purity operating system. It's just more geared towards capacity rather than performance. And then the other thing that we're very excited about, and this sort of points back to my earlier comment about embracing the hybrid cloud. So we've also announced Cloud Block Store, and Cloud Block Store allows a flash array, effectively a flash array, to run today in AWS, and later it will be Azure, but it effectively allows you to run flash array in AWS. So you can go onto the marketplace and you can actually deploy flash array based on you run it over. The cost model is really based on time, and you can deploy flash array for as long as you need to in the cloud. You don't get the performance metrics of flash array in the cloud, flash array on-prem, obviously, but what you do get is all the features of Purity. So it may not be, it will look like a flash array, it will sound like a flash array. You get all the features that you understand from the on-prem flash array, but you get it in the cloud. So the next question is, well, why would I want to do that? Well, on flash array X on-prem, we have Snap to S3. So you can take a snapshot. We've discussed those already. You can take a snapshot on your on-prem flash array X, and then snap it, transport it to an S3 target, which in this case is AWS, and then you can mount that snapshot up onto your flash array running in the cloud. So this is a great DR solution. So I can just send my snaps, and as Sean outlined, every hour or every 15 minutes, I can send my snaps to AWS, and then in the event of failure, I can just spin up flash array in the cloud. I can mount my snapshots, and I've got a copy of the data and my flash array effectively running in the cloud. It might not be for disaster. It might be for test dev or some other data reusability work case. So again, we're very excited, and hopefully it shows you that even though we're an on-prem storage vendor, we are actually embracing some of the advantages of cloud. So we're very excited about how this is going to develop. Okay, so we'll build this slide out during the session, but it will give you a good sense of what technology can fit into what technology Pure and Veeam can do together, and what recovery use cases get solved. Because generally, generally in the backup world, people are obsessed with backup rates and backup performance, which is great. But really, the question you have to ask yourself is, why are you backing up? Well, ultimately it's to recover. And so what we're finding today is, yes, I have an outage, I have to bring my data back quickly. But what we're also finding is that, I think over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, there's certainly been a sea change where organizations have understood that data not only, keeps my business running, but properly analyzed and used and utilized, data is a great competitive advantage. So I can look at the data, prior to this session, I was just with our web team talking about our external website, and by analyzing the data on our people's behavior on our external website, it drives certain behaviors. So, we're using our own internal data to our own competitive advantage. So just keep in mind this sort of this diagram as we build it out. FlashArray has talked about snapshots and active cluster, and they're great solutions for really quick, really quick recovery. And you'll see this slide build up as we go through. So now I'm going to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about building a data hub. Okay, so we're going to talk about our FlashBlade product, but I'll just kind of give you a brief overview, because I think a lot of people understand what FlashArray is. FlashBlade is more of an emerging product. So Pure have had this we've had this in the portfolio for now a couple of years, and really, again, it's an all-flash offering, obviously, but it's designed to solve different problems. And it's really it's really at a high level the problem that you see on the slide here. And it sort of links back to what I said earlier about data. There are a lot of new applications. We're in the time of streaming analytics and data warehouses and AI clusters and data lakes. So this is a massive, the data industry is growing rapidly. And what we found is that, the vendors of these applications don't care particularly much. They're software vendors. They don't, they just see disk as something that you run stuff on and don't particularly care so much about what it is. But I think, again, there's sort of a sea change going there. If you talk to Splunk and Elastic and Vertica, they actually now starting to understand the advantages of disaggregated storage and compute. It actually makes their applications run a lot better. But generally, before that, we were starting to see customers standing up, specific storage arrays for specific applications. And you don't need to be a genius to figure out that this is a really inefficient approach. It's actually quite risky because it's very complicated. You don't have you've got multiple vendors, and they all are different underneath, and they all have their own nuances. So you've got a lot of risk and complexity, and you also have a lot of silos. You end up with, this is just a high level slide, but you can see on here we've got just with these applications, you've got you've basically got 5 data silos here. So we took this problem a couple of years ago, and the solution was FlashBlade. So FlashBlade, designed from the ground up, is a highly scalable all flash blade based technology storage offering. And I guess it's different. It's different because it's not block storage, so it's really geared for file and object. So it has native S3, it has NFS, it has SMB, and what we're seeing is, there's this notion in the technology place that's changing, that the object storage is slow and big, right? You don't need performant object, but I think that's certainly changing. And at a high level, FlashBlade is simply very, very fast object store that's highly scalable and elastic, built on blade technology. So every time you add a blade, so every time you increase storage with FlashBlade, it comes on a blade. You put the blade into the chassis. The storage becomes available in a single namespace, and that blade comes with its own storage and compute. So we're completely out of this storage nightmare where the bigger it gets, the slower it becomes. And in fact, if anything, FlashBlade's performance actually increases as it gets bigger because we're adding CPU and network to every storage allocation. So we've just released a 150 blade FlashBlade, which gives you raw capacity of about 9 petabytes, usable around 5, and we'll continue to scale this further. So we originally conceived FlashBlade to support this growing band of new applications like the Splunks and the Elastics and the Verticas. We never conceived it as a backup target, primarily because we thought the price point of FlashBlade would not be acceptable for a backup target. Anyway, like everything else in this world, you give a product to a sales guy and they'll go and do something completely different than you wanted them to. And we actually started, and this all happened on the East Coast, we actually had some very early successes with FlashBlade as a backup target for really the reason I talked about, which is FlashBlade's performance doesn't decrease as it gets bigger, it only improves. And customers traditionally don't have a problem backing up because generally the backup targets that people use are optimized for backup, but restore just becomes an afterthought. And FlashBlade, I wouldn't say it's completely the different way, it's completely reverse of that. It gives you as good a performance as any backup target out there, but where FlashBlade is awesome is when it comes to recovery. And the other piece on top of that is, if you think about deduplicated backups, great for optimization, great for backup, shortens the window, you're backing up less data. But just think about what happens when you recover with that technology. It's kind of the reverse, right? You've got to reinflate or rehydrate your backup stream, which means you have to, the disk array that or the backup appliance that you're storing it on has to go through, has to find the block, then find the next block, and then find the next block. And if you're doing that on spinning disk, you pay a big penalty for read time. And we don't have spinning disk in this. This is all flash. So we get out of that penalty as well. And that's what makes FlashBlade a really great backup and recovery target. And again, the beauty of it, certainly with Veeam, is just in the same way that FlashArray snapshots plug in seamlessly to Veeam, FlashBlade also plugs seamlessly into Veeam. So you just present FlashBlade as an NFS target or an SMB target to Veeam, and you're done. Okay, and you can see here, we like to show the value of FlashBlade. Sure, backup performance is great, restore performance is even better, but we like to show the value of FlashBlade in terms of dollars, in terms of the amount of time you save when you're bringing back mission critical systems. So you can see there's a very simple example. You can dig into the research, but we're showing average restore time of 2 minutes versus 85, and a lot of our customers are able to quantify, generally because they've had a bad restore experience. A lot of our customers are able to quantify that money saved in respect of less time to recover, and you literally can see the performance improvement. And there are white papers on the website. There's videos where we will show you the recovery performance accelerated through FlashBlade. It's literally as simple as that. Just present FlashBlade to Veeam and you're off and running. And I just wanted to kind of just close this part of the session out by talking about, so I introduced the start of this section as the data hub, and I've talked about one of the use cases, but this is FlashBlade in a bigger context. So we have a lot of customers, 80% of the customers that acquire FlashBlade for backup and recovery are actually doing something else with it. So you can see you've got your Splunks and Elastics, Kafka, Spark, TensorFlow, Kubernetes. There's a whole series of other applications that run really, really well on FlashBlade. And you can see some of them there. And as I said, 80% of our customers that use FlashBlade for rapid restore are running other applications on FlashBlade. So this starts to break down those data silos that I introduced at the start of this section. You know, I've now got a high performance, fast object store that's able not only to be my backup and recovery target, but it can also start hosting all of my large unstructured applications that need horsepower when I'm using them. So I'm going to hand back to Sean because he's actually going to give you an example of a great application that runs well on FlashBlade.
All right, thank you, David. So David brought up some really great points, right? Actually, I've been with Veeam for going on 9 years now. It'll be 9 years next month, right? And I've worked with a lot of customers who, before they adopted Veeam into their infrastructure, they were treating backup as like what we at Veeam like to refer to as closet backups, right? You just perform backups and you kind of throw them in a closet and forget you even have it, right? Where it really gets important is when you actually have to perform some sort of recovery, right? We did a survey of 500 companies, and we found out that only like 2% of customers actively test their backups for recoverability, right? And this is very important because there's a Forrester research out there that shows 20% of recovery attempts fail, right? You really don't want to be in that 20% to have a failure when you're having a major company-wide outage, when your mission-critical application is down and you're not able to recover it. That just causes longer downtimes, right? Some companies cannot recover from that type of outage. Right? So in order to be able to verify recoverability and to be able to leverage the data that we have within our backups, another great point that David brought up, right? Data is a commodity. Right? You can leverage it for your advantage, right? You can use it for analytics. Right? You can determine where to make changes. So Veeam gives you that capability in our data labs. Within data labs, we have the capability to automatically verify recoverability of your backups. Right? This is very important because a lot of applications out there, and we're kind of used to CRC checks just to make sure that there's no corrupt data, right? But having non-corrupt data does not mean you have recoverable applications, right? Two completely different things. So what our Sure Backup technology does is it builds on top of data labs by allowing you to specify application groups. So you can specify dependencies for specific applications, like for example with Exchange, right? You can ensure that we boot up global catalog, Active Directory with global catalog before we boot up an Exchange server, so it functions like it would in production. And Veeam can do this all in automated fashion, and we can go in there and perform recovery checks, right? We can make sure that the Exchange server comes online, it responds to pings, right? We can even execute test scripts against it to make sure that it is indeed recoverable. And when it's done, it can shut everything down and send you an automated report with everything that we found during our recovery verification tests. That data lab is also used for a number of other purposes, right? We have customers using this daily for things like test dev, right? In the past, test dev required a dedicated environment, right? And the challenge I found with test dev is customers just have a challenge trying to keep it in lockstep with production, right? Test dev always fell behind production, sometimes weeks, sometimes even months, right? So that test dev environment is no longer production-like at that point, right? Any changes that you make in test dev may not accurately reflect what you're running in production any longer because it lags so far behind. How about being able to spin up a test dev environment within a matter of minutes with data that was just snapshotted on the flash array a couple of minutes ago? Now I can give you a production-like environment, right? And you can run that from a snapshot, or you can run it from a backup that resides on FlashBlade. And you can get really great performance, and you can hand these off to your application developers. Right? And they can go in there and do a number of different things, troubleshooting, testing workarounds and patches, right? They can do product development, right? Which is important because now you're able to leverage that data. You're able to leverage that investment. And we introduce a couple of other features that can help you provide a more secure environment, right? So next slide, please, David. One of the new features we recently introduced is Secure Restore, right? With the threat of ransomware and malware being very high, right? There's a chance that when you took that backup of that machine that was infected, that malware or ransomware may have been dormant for a week, a month, right? And then when you go to recover, that backup that you just took last night is already infected, right? So how do you find a copy of that backup that has not been infected? And that's where Secure Restore comes in. What this does is it actually leverages the data lab and builds on top of that. It allows you to boot up a virtual machine that you're looking to recover in this isolated environment. And then we can run through and execute an antivirus or an anti-malware software to go and scan that virtual machine and make sure that it's not infected before you recover it. And the great thing about this, and it's a little bit of a tidbit, right? You may be running one vendor's software in your live environment. You can actually use a different vendor's software here to scan for this. That way you have two different products scanning for malware. And if it finds an infection, you can choose what to do with that restore, right? You can scrap the restore altogether, or you can restore it and keep the network adapters disabled so you don't infect any other applications or any other virtual machines within your environment. And then you can go in there and manually remove the threat or manually scan and quarantine any other potential threats on that virtual machine. Next slide, please, David. Another great option that builds on top of the Data Labs technology is staged restore. And this was developed for our customers that are in the EMEA market, right? That have GDPR compliance and regulation requirements to be able to remove the customer data, right? The right to be forgotten. Right? What we can do is inside of our virtual lab, we can boot up these applications before you perform any type of restore, and we can execute that same script that you run in production to find and remove all of that customer's personal data. We can execute that inside this isolated environment before restoring the virtual machine back to production, right? So we can ensure that the version of the machine that you've just restored is indeed compliant because all of that customer's information has been removed and stripped out. So those are some really great use cases that you can leverage the Data Labs technology for. But the important thing to note is that in order to do any of these different options, any of these different things that I just talked about, you need to have a performant backup storage solution, right? And that's where the FlashBlade really shines, as David mentioned. It really shines on the restore and recovery piece, right? So it makes for a really great platform to be able to run all of these different options that we provide with the Veeam solution. And now I'll pass it back to David.
Thanks, Sean. And I just want to echo that. You know, the Veeam, I just wanted to go back to the Veeam Data Labs. I mean, there's a lot of other vendors, you may be using an alternative here, that have tried to build this functionality. I truly believe this is one of Veeam's biggest differentiations, is that how neat and simple it is to get the Data Lab stood up, and the value is immense. And, you know, the beauty, FlashBlade was literally designed to run applications like that. So I would urge you, if you're not a Veeam customer, go check it out, because it's an awesome feature. Okay, so just to kind of go back to this diagram, now we've sort of added rapid restore. Rapid restore sort of provides sort of that gap where potentially you can't do snapshots if you're using a disk array that doesn't support them, really provide sort of, I like to feel mission critical recovery where I can't use snapshots as a target. I'm not, for one, advocating that every backup you do should go to a FlashBlade. It doesn't make cost sense. But, when we're talking to customers, where those 5 or 6 mission critical applications that need recovering, that's where you should deploy FlashBlade. That's where you will get the most benefit from putting FlashBlade in. So streaming normal backups still have their place. Your businesses can tolerate, 80% of applications aren't mission critical. They're important, but you've got more time to bring them back. And that's where sort of streaming backups fit in quite nicely. And again, just an example, and I spoke to this earlier, but again, one of our customers where we had great success with Veeam is, where we had them using PACS, the medical imaging application, and some other S3 workloads. And again, I think what's important here is if you just look at that business value and the technical value, the business value, yeah, we were a higher cost per gigabyte. There's no getting away with this. I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're the cheapest deal in town. We're not. But what's important here is we guaranteed, an SLA, an SLA recovery. We guaranteed that. So that's what really differentiated us here. And then you can see we shrunk down, and customers often say this to me, I kind of forget, but, we have a very small form factor. And when you're in a data center, that's a big deal. And then we were able to break down some of those silos with application consolidation. So having files and objects in the same disk array. Okay, so we're just going to close out now where we're talking about, well, this is great for my on-prem story, but I've got a bunch of tape, or what's my sort of last line of defense, which has typically been tape. And we're not, this has been going on a little while, but customers are leveraging cloud and private object stores to store data for long term, because it starts to make sense, and I can get at it. Not only have I got a compliance requirement, but Sean mentioned it earlier, data is a commodity and I want to be able to use it. And if it's sitting on a bunch of tape in a dark room, how do I use that? I can't. It's a big effort. Whereas if I can put it onto the cloud or onto a lower tier of storage, then I can get to it. I don't have to recover it in 2 minutes, but I can't wait 15 days to bring a tape back. So we acquired a company called StorageUse. We've repackaged it. We've hardened it. We continue to build it out, which is effectively, it's now called Object Engine, which is effectively an S3 deduplication application. And this sits behind Veeam, and this allows us to take backups that sit on FlashBlade and then move those off to the cloud or to a private object store. So you can see, this is a bit of an eye chart, but this really shows you how this is sort of end-to-end. An Object Engine is part of Veeam's capacity tier, and Object Engine will deduplicate data that comes to it. Any S3 data, whether it's come from Veeam or an S3 application, and then in our current release, we send that to AWS. And when it comes to recovery, you can recover directly from AWS. You don't have to reverse this cycle. You can recover directly from AWS into to your target systems, and Veeam orchestrates this nicely. So Object Engine gives us this scale out, fast deduplication engine. And again, we've taken the same approach. We've disaggregated the storage and the compute. Object Engine comes with no storage. It's merely a deduplication processing engine that scales out. You can keep adding additional nodes to Object Engine to improve your backup and restore performance. But again, the beauty of it is it fits really easily as part of Veeam's capacity tier. And again, our first customer, once we'd acquired StorageUse, built it out, hardened it, and became Object Engine. Our first Object Engine customer was a joint Veeam customer, and they actually had multiple backup applications. They also had Oracle Warehouse, and again, we could lower total cost of ownership with dedupe. And this customer now is, this was before we had the cloud capability, so we were just deduplicating backups that sat on FlashBlade, and now this customer is taking that and moving some of their data into public cloud for long-term retention. So just to conclude, you now see with Veeam and Pure, we've got you covered from a recovery point and a recovery time objective, which requires seconds all the way through to that long-term retention, whether you want to leverage cloud or a private object store. So Veeam and Pure together, we have it covered all the way through the stack. So we'll pause there, and I think, David, we're going to open up for questions.
Yes, we do have some good questions for you, Sean and David. Let's see. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this call to action slide for additional information. While we do that, I want to make sure, David and Sean, are you there? You ready for some questions?
I am here.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I've got some additional information, some links on there. They're on the screen now. There's information on the Pure and Veeam partner website, FlashArray and Veeam integration, Veeam and Rapid Restore. And you can also download this full presentation, including these call to action links, in the handouts tab right there in the GoToWebinar control panel. So if you have a question about today's topic, now's the time to get it in. Sean, how about encryption when it comes to Veeam backup data?
We do support encryption within Veeam. Actually, there's a couple different ways we have encryption built into Veeam. There's encryption for transport. There's also encryption of the backup file itself. And Veeam actually has a unique two-key encryption system, whereas you can have an encryption key at the backup and replication server, and then we also have a federated view within Backup Enterprise Manager that's also included, and you can have a second administration key there in case, for example, your backup admin just ups and leaves and takes the key with him, right? You have a higher level admin key that can still unlock and recover your backups.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's nice. That's really important. Let's see, another question here. They say, I'm an existing Veeam customer. How disruptive would it be to deploy FlashBlade? Sean, what have you seen on that?
So if they're an existing Veeam customer, right, they already have backups going to some sort of repository. So when we introduce FlashBlade to that type of environment, we would just essentially be creating a new repository for Veeam. And what we can do is we have capabilities within Veeam where we can either add the additional space into a scale-out backup repository with the old repository that they had before along with FlashBlade, or we can just create a new repository within Veeam and then just simply point existing backups over to the new repository and start new backups running to the repository. So it will not impact their environment, right? It's simply just moving data between the repositories. So we won't have to take backups again. We can simply just point new backups to the new FlashBlade repository.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes it easy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. Let's see, another question here. James is asking, or I guess commenting, all the backup vendors have virtual machine protection. Why should he look at Veeam? What makes Veeam unique, Sean?
That's a pretty loaded question, and I could spend a whole lot of time answering that question, right? So there's some really unique capability within Veeam. I guess the easiest thing to do is don't take my word for it, right, about how different Veeam is or how great Veeam is, because I work for Veeam, right? That's kind of what I get paid to do. If you're interested in looking at Veeam, we do have a full 30-day trial online, right? You can download it. You can try it at your leisure and has all the capabilities unlocked. But we have some really unique integrations with different storage vendors. I'd like to say that Veeam has evolved along with the industry, right? And data protection has evolved. So we give you some really great capabilities that can leverage the functionality built into these storage arrays, so you can get the best of the best, the most efficient backup, right? You can leverage snapshots. You can do a number of different things, and it's all built into a single console within Veeam.
Very nice, very nice. David, are you on the call yet? I think David's having.
I'm here.
Can we hear you? Oh, excellent.
Yeah, hopefully
I can hear you.
Sorry,
Yes.
I don't know what's going on. Excellent.
No worries.
Okay.
Here's a question from Adrian, and yeah, I don't know if this is a question for David or Sean, either one of you, perhaps both. And he's commenting basically that they already have disk-based storage for their Veeam data protection. I think he's trying to understand what makes the PureStorage solution that was presented here today different. Is it just faster, or what makes it different?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just for the purposes of this call, simply a lot of disk storage that's used for backup struggles. It does a great job for backup, and those devices are optimized for backup, but they're not optimized for restore. And what we've seen, in fact, I was on a call with a customer this morning, talking about their deployment. They were using Veeam. What they've seen is consistent, predictable recovery numbers, regardless of how much data there is how much backup data they're storing. And what we see with other solutions in the market is, as they fill up, they get slower, just because FlashBlade's compute scales with the amount of storage that goes into the box. So we don't have that problem that when we fill up, our restore times diminish. So I think that's the biggest difference. And architecturally, it's very modular and compute.
Sean, what have you seen in terms of when partnered with PureStorage and using that for the storage repository, just from a standard JBOD that someone might be using today? What kind of difference have you seen?
Yep, and to David's point, right, the biggest difference really comes when it comes time to recover, right? And that's when the rubber meets the road, right? This is the whole reason why you're performing backups, is to be able to efficiently recover or restore what you need in a time of disaster. And I think that's where FlashBlade really shines, right? Where the recovery performance is outstanding, because it is all flash, right? And it does have the IOPS, and it does have the compute and memory needed to perform very fast recoveries. And you can really see that when you leverage something like FlashBlade, when you use it to run something like the data labs, right? Where you're actually running virtual machines directly off of your backup file, right? So that's when the performance really counts.
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, so many people focus on backup, but they forget that recovery is even more so important, because that's the whole point, that you're backing up to begin with. And I think we've seen that especially with all these ransomware infections, when suddenly they need to recover like every server, every file share, every desktop they have in a very short amount of time, and then suddenly they realize, whoa, our backup repository just wasn't strong enough to meet that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's when it actually costs the company money, right? Is when you're having to recover. I mean, it doesn't cost you money when your backups run a little long, but it will cost you money when your recovery time gets extended.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Let's see, another question that came in here. They're asking about testing, backup and recovery. Sean, I know Veeam has automated testing of some kind built in, but I'm curious. I mean, we're talking about recovery. Is there some way to test what a mass recovery would look like, and maybe the time that it might take?
Yeah, they're probably talking a little bit more about something like disaster recovery, right? We have a couple of different options when it comes to recovery. We have the ability to actually stand up virtual machines directly off of the backup file. We have capabilities to just restore individual virtual disks, individual files, individual objects. But if you're talking like a mass recovery where there's many virtual machines involved, that's probably something like a disaster recovery, where we actually have built-in replication. So you can actually replicate virtual machines to another cluster, and then you can create something like a failover plan within Veeam, right, to specify the order in which you want to fail over to those virtual machines. And you can execute that failover plan in a bubble, right, just to make sure you can bring those virtual machines back online. Is actually something very similar to Sure Backup called Sure Replica, right? So we can execute your disaster recovery plan in an isolated fashion. And then you can use that to judge how much time it would take for you to recover, a handful or many VMs should a disaster occur.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I'm sure that's something that every company out there needs. Let's see, we're starting to run out of time here. There are a few more questions coming in for Pure and David, but I know David's having trouble connecting, so we will route those questions to David right after the event, and hopefully he'll be able to get back to you and get all those questions answered. So we appreciate those questions about PureStorage. Lots of great questions about Veeam as well. Before we wrap it up, I do want to announce our prize winner of the Amazon $300 gift card. Let's see, that is going out to Ken Trant of California. Congratulations, Ken Trant of California. We'll reach out to deliver that gift card. I want to remind everyone that you can download the presentation. And in fact, Sandra just came in with a question and said, how do we download the presentation? Great question, because that's what I'm about to talk about. If you go to the handouts tab right there in your audience console, there's a little drop down. You can click on the PDF and all of the presentation slides are in there. And also you'll find the call to action slide at the end with these special URLs that are on the screen right now. So before we close out the presentation, make sure that you go ahead and download that asset. And with that, I think we have covered everything. Sean and David, it's been great having you on the event today. Thanks, Sean.
All right, thanks, David.
And thank you to Veeam and PureStorage for supporting today's webinar. For more information, make sure you visit the Veeam and Pure partner website. See you next time and have a great day.